Have you ever done a blood test? People don't like needles. They take your blood in syringes, and it takes time for the results to come out. But if I tell you that from one drop of your blood, I can run 100 tests and give you the results while you sit at home, you like the product, right? You'll invest in such a startup, right? You're not alone in thinking this. America's ex-Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, their ex-Defense Secretary, General Mattis, ex-CEO of an insurance company named Wells Fargo, all invested in this company. They were on the company's board of directors, a startup with a valuation of $10 billion and investors of $700 million. One of the biggest companies from Silicon Valley. There was just one problem, a small one: their product never used to work. This is the story of Theranos, which turned out to be one of the biggest scams in Silicon Valley. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay up to date and be notified when we post new videos. The Steve Jobs obsession. Theranos founder was Elizabeth Holmes, who dropped out from Stanford at the age of 19 and started this company with her professor. Her grandfather was a surgeon, and she was scared of needles, which influenced her to make such a biotech-type company. A very weird thing is that over time, Elizabeth Holmes had become very obsessed with Steve Jobs. A journalist once compared her to Steve Jobs, so she cut the newspaper clipping and put it in her office. She got to know that Steve Jobs used to keep all his marketing meetings on Wednesdays, so she started keeping her marketing meetings with the same firm on Wednesdays. She also started hiring ex-Apple employees. She started writing notes in her diary like "Become Steve Jobs." She also changed her voice so that people started taking her seriously. And she started wearing black turtleneck sweaters just like Steve Jobs. By June 2016, Elizabeth Holmes' net worth went down from $4.5 billion to zero. And now, a case is going on Elizabeth Holmes and their COO Sunny Balwani of buyer fraud and conspiracy. How did it all happen? Their original product was a sensor that would go on your body as a patch will take your body's readings and give you medicines in real time. After starting the company, she raised $1 million from her family, friends, and neighbors and started growing the company. As the company started growing, she raised more money, and by 2014, she had raised $400 million and the company's valuation was $9 billion. In 2006, she released a prototype of her product, a small mobile laboratory whose name was Edison. To do a blood test in this mobile laboratory, she made a small container called a nanotube that can collect one drop of your blood and give the results on the machine. There are different types of chemical reactions involved in a blood test. If you want to do all these tests in a small box, you'll have to fit all the components in that box. After doing this, the components started interfering with each other and started affecting the results. In a magazine's profile, their founder Elizabeth Holmes told the interviewer that her machine could do 200 different types of blood tests, and in the future, she wanted to do 1,000 different types of tests. But the problem was that their new revolutionary product never worked properly. Later, when this scam became public and all the information was outed from the employees, it was found out that their machine could actually only do 15 tests. And that too not reliably. For all the other tests, Theranos bought their competitors' machines, ran the tests on their machines, and gave the results to the people. Because the nano container for blood was so small, to run so many blood tests, they had to dilute the blood. After diluting the blood, test results became worse and gave different results to people. They didn't disclose all these facts to their investors, and all this information started coming out when their ex-employees started talking to people and when journalists started to research that company. Because people didn't know about this, Theranos as a company started growing and becoming big. Till 2015, they had also acquired big clients and started putting their blood tests in pharmacies. The influence of them and their investors was so big that in America's Arizona state, they authored a law. According to this law, if someone wants to take a blood test, they don't need a doctor's permission. To understand all this misinformation, see these two articles of the same magazine. In 2014, Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos was in Fortune magazine's cover story, and a very good profile of her was written comparing her to Steve Jobs. But in 2015, the same writer had to write a big retraction and had to explain how Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes misled them and told lies about their company. When all of this information started coming out, Elizabeth Holmes went on TV and made her case in a CNBC interview. She said, "This is what happens when you work to change things, and first, they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world." Sadly, this didn't happen. Written comparing her to Steve Jobs. How was this scam discovered? When people started researching, they learned that there were problems in this company since the start. When a new machine Edison was being made, Elizabeth Holmes gave teams of 2 different engineers the work of making the same product. But the catch here was that the team whose product wasn't good would be immediately fired. The confrontation. In 2006, when this company was very new at that time, the CEO confronted the founder. They told the founder that they thought the financial information was being misrepresented for this company. So, what did Elizabeth Holmes do? She fired him on the spot, and for the next 10 years, the position of CFO or Chief Financial Officer was vacant. When their products were out in pharmacies, the results were so off that they started affecting the doctor's decision-making. After all this information got out, she removed all the big investors from their board of directors. She reduced their board of directors to only 5 members, out of which even one didn't have any medical experience. Of course, all of the investors lost their money, and many big investors are also included in this. For example, Rupert Murdoch, who owns the Fox Group, and the Waltons family, who owns Walmart. What do startup investors look at? When there is less data to see, the investors emphasize the startup's founder or the founding members. Apart from the founding team, investors also see: what is the product? How big is the opportunity in the market? If the business model is working or not, and if the company has made any intellectual property or technology. They also see that investors have referred this startup to them. And here lay Elizabeth Holmes' biggest success. She had convinced America's known investors, generals, and politicians that she was genuine, and even her product was genuine. In an interview, Stanford's old professor, who had also been a board member, said that, "I could have just as well been looking into the eyes of a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates." She had convinced her investors and board members to this extent. She used her conviction and her investors' credibility and kept growing her company. But surely there is one thing: she might have convinced so many investors, but she was never able to fully convince the experts in this field. Once, when she went on lunch with Harvard Medical School's dean, he said that she looked very smart, but when he asked specific questions about its technology, he felt that she didn't know all the answers. But still, he never felt that the product was not real and that she was lying. All the factors that investors see before investing in a startup. From the surface, Theranos had everything: new technology, big market opportunities, a good business model, and a revolutionary founder. There was only one thing that the company and investors didn't have, and that was the company's founder's integrity. If you want more in-depth information about this story, there's a book named Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, and even a documentary has been made on this company called The Inventor. Like, share, and subscribe. Everyone, please, even though I'm not supposed to say please.